The Happy Prince by Oscar Wilde. The Happy Prince is a beautiful story about a statue of an erstwhile prince yearning to help his people. The premise of the plot is anchored to a very interesting theme, which is shifting perspectives. Think about this while you read the story and see if you can figure out what that might be. The Happy Prince is a tall statue with sapphires for eyes, a ruby-studded sword, and covered all over with delicate golden leaves. One night, a swallow headed to Egypt made a pit stop at the statue to get some sleep for the night. Out of nowhere, the bird felt a drop of water fall on it. Surprised, given how there wasn't a single cloud in the sky, when he looked up, he found that the Happy Prince was the one shedding tears. It turns out that the Happy Prince used to live in the same palace where sorrow wasn't allowed to enter. So, he was perpetually happy. But after his death, they set his statue up so high that he could see all the misery of his city, which makes even his lead heart weep. The prince pleads with the swallow to help the seamstress struggling to stitch the satin gown for the queen's maid of honor whilst having a sick son lying ill in the corner of her room. The prince asks the swallow to take the ruby from his sword and give it to the woman. The swallow agrees to stay for a night and help out the woman. The swallow flies all the way to the house, drops the ruby on the seamstress's table. He then flies near the sick boy's head, gently fanning his forehead. Once the bird flew back to the prince, he admitted feeling warm despite it being cold that night. The prince believes that this was because the swallow had performed a good deed. The next night, the prince pleads with the swallow to stay one more night. A young man was trying to finish a play for the director of theatre. But the poor man was starving and there was no fire in the grate. He was completely burnt out and starving. The prince asks the swallow to pluck out one of his sapphire eyes to give it to the man, and the bird hesitantly obliges. The next night, the prince once again asks the swallow to deliver his other eye to the little match girl who had dropped her matches. She would get beaten by her father if she does not bring home some money. The swallow obliges. Now the bird realizes that the prince did not have both his eyes. So, it promises to remain by the prince's side forever and help him help poor people. When the swallow flew over the city the subsequent nights, he witnessed a lot of suffering among the poor people, while the rich people seemed to be happy. The prince asked the swallow to distribute the gold leaves on his body to the poor children. Soon, the winter set in and the swallow grew weak. It confessed its love for the prince, gave him a kiss, and died at the feet of the statue. A curious sound followed this event, which was the sound of the prince's lead heart breaking. The mayor deemed the statue ugly and got it pulled down. They melted the statue in the furnace, but the heart just wouldn't melt. So, the heart is thrown in the dust heap where the dead swallow also lay. Later, the god's angel deems the heart and the bird to be the most precious thing in the city. The bird now sings in the garden of paradise, and the Happy Prince praises the Almighty in his city of gold. The Happy Prince was immeasurably happy when he was alive. He lived in a royal bubble filled with his every want and wish. Right from material things to family, support, and love, the happy prince had it all. And so, he never saw the rest of the world. Once he died, he was placed outside the walls of the palace, a scene he had never seen before when he was alive. He could see beggars on the street, sick patients inside houses, and poverty scattered across the town. This shift in his perspective from that of inside the walls of the palace to the outside brought a huge change in who he was. He yearned to help and see people happy. And then the rest is history. What is an important takeaway here though? Have you heard of the phrase, put yourself in their shoes? To be a valuable member of the society, it is important to be able to empathize and sympathize with people. And to do that, you must value their life experience. You should listen, you should see, you should hear beyond the bubble that is your own life. Do you remember how the swallow felt warm the first time it had helped someone, despite the cold weather? That is because helping people is one of the many ways that could make you happy, whilst also making someone else's day brighter.